Hello guys, today we will be talking about what if Naruto went back in time part 6. If you enjoy this video, always like and subscribe. Now let's begin. Fugaku watched as they stared at one another. Two birds of the same feather, two adults, for what else was he to call minds such as those, in the skins of children? His son Itachi watched on with interest, cold black eyes staring into sky blue pools. They were silent and their eyes roamed one another. Then suddenly, the Uzumaki boy smiled, and surprisingly his son did so in turn. Itachi hadn't smiled in years. I thank you for inviting me to your home, Fugaku-san. And I thank you for receiving my invitation. I hope you will find your meal delicious. I hope you will find my home adequate. I hope you will find my family pleasant and your time here enjoyable. Fugaku smiled. That was an old mantra, as old as Konoha itself, maybe even older. The boy continued on. Your home is wonderful. Your family far more than pleasant, and I am sure your meal will be splendid. Good, good. Why don't you and Sasuke-kun go and wash up before we eat? When you return we will discuss what needs to be discussed. Do what needs to be done. By then my wife should be done. They were back a few minutes later, and once more the Uzumaki bowed. The meal before them was a simple one. Rice and steamed tuna, with lightly fried vegetables. He waited, as was tradition, for his guest to eat first. The boy waited as well, taking time to look at every piece of food, savor the smells, and then he smiled. A wonderful meal, Uchiha-sama, the blonde turned to his wife, my mouth waters at the thought of eating it. He picked up his chopsticks and slowly started to eat his meal. Fugaku followed, and afterwards his wife and children started to eat as well. They ate in silence, and when they were done Mikoto began to pick up the plates. It was then that Fugaku decided to speak with the young blonde. Uzumaki-san, tell me, what are your dreams? He stopped for a second, the boy looked at him, his blue eyes burrowing and seeking something in Fugaku before he responded. I want to protect my precious people. I want to become so strong that no one can touch them. I want to make them so strong that no one will even think about touching them. I want to protect Konoha and her people. I want to make my friends, and old man Hokage, proud. His voice started out strong and stayed that way. Despite its small, high-pitched tone, Fugaku could still easily tell how serious the boy took those goals. Those are admirable dreams, Naruto-kun. The voice was that of his son. Itachi had chosen to remain quiet the entire dinner, and when he finally spoke, Fugaku could see his son's eyes peering at the Uzumaki. Their eyes locked, some deep understanding went between them, and suddenly Fugaku felt slightly lost. Set adrift at sea, an ocean of the unknown crashing down on him. His stomach wrenched. He looked at Sasuke, and he too held the same look. I hope you can achieve them. He will. Sasuke and Naruto spoke at the same time. Fugaku felt lost. Something had happened here, but what? Commandeer between similar minds? A meeting of lost souls? He sighed in annoyance before casting a casual look at the clock. It seems it is getting rather late. Itachi, why don't you escort Naruto-kun home? Of course, father. His eldest son and Naruto both stood. Can I go with you? Asked father. Fugaku looked at his sons and the blonde once more. Then nodded his head and Sasuke stood as well. The three exited the room a few minutes later. His wife returned as they left. That's the thing. For now he's a child, but the years are short, and soon that child will be a man. What then? His wife was quiet for a moment. Yes. He stood up and kissed her. The future looks interesting. Scarecrow blood dripped from his blade in the light of the full moon. His mask, a white porcelain thing inscribed with more seals than he could count, clung tightly to his face. Swirls of deep blood red swooped up from its cheeks, and to its beak, twin large black circles made at its face. Intricate inks of green swirled around its face to create the illusion of feather. His black cloak was slick with blood and carried the deep metallic stench of death repeated again and again. Tonight had been a long one. A beam of thundering lightning lit the night blue and white as he jumped to the side, his Sharingan spinning in his skull simultaneously. His body was moving, acting, killing without him even being aware of it. Moments like this, he became a machine. A harbinger of death. An earth justu devoured the body before it hit the ground. More blood. The machine came down, and his body moved again. Was a machine. More blood. He was in Kakashi Haddock. Failure. More blood. He was simply Scarecrow, the executioner. Scarecrow the mass murderer. Scarecrow the blood drinker and maker of widows. He dodged right, grabbed the arm and cut through it with pure lightning manipulation. There was a scream for half a second, and then the night went silent, and his blade was in her throat. His jutsu ate her body once more. A flowing torrent of precious life essence, of lovely red-hued life ambrosia. He wasn't Kakashi Haddock, he was Scarecrow. He was Anbu. He was death, and like this, he didn't have to think. To feel guilty, to feel his failures. To feel the blood of Rin on his hands. Too busy with killing. His blade flashed in the night, and a head was separated from its body. A cry. A distorted shout of pain. He was gone in an instant. He was Scarecrow, and no one died on his squad. He met Robin with a deep gash in her side, looking frantically for her opponent. Get your head out your ass, newbie, calm down. His own eyes were scanning now. Looking, and looking. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Stupid Robin for getting cut with a lightning chakra-infused blade. Stupid him for coming to help her directly instead of flanking around and taking her opponent by surprise. Stupid fucking Cloud Jounin for not masking his chakra properly. He was gone in an instant, his foot meeting flesh in an overpowered shunshin. The Jounin grunted and grabbed the foot, but it was too late. He'd replaced himself with a cage bunshin at the same instant his hit connected. It exploded, and the sound carried throughout the forest. He was dead. His blood splattered throughout the forest. Scarecrow looked left. Robin was still on the ground, her blood slowly pooling beneath her feet. He sighed. Rookie, that's a skin wound in this industry. Get your shit together. Come on, you won't die. Ranger will patch you up. No one in Squad 1 has ever died, and I won't start with you today. Get your shit together, get your ass up, and move. He extended a hand, and she shakily grabbed it. Tenzo dropped down from the tree overhead. Scarecrow cast him a look from behind his mask, twisted his hand in a series of twitches, and the masked Hanbu careened off. What the hell happened to you, rookie? How'd you let him get close enough to cut you, then lose him a few seconds later? Might as well paint a target on your back and walk around nude for all good basic, did you? Rose dropped down as he berated Robin. She chuckled. Don't worry about it, rookie. Trust me. Senpai gets on all our asses the first couple months. Especially after a fuck up. Fix her up. Rose. It'll take us a fortnight to get to Konoha if you don't. Kakashi blood dripped off him in a fast, harsh flow. The water seared his skin, and no matter how much of the rough, cleansing soap he used, the scent of blood wouldn't leave his body. He scrubbed furiously, he always did. He hated the after-mission regret, no, not regret, the after-mission shame he felt. The complete feeling of dread that consumed him once his task was done. When he was on a mission, when he was Scarecrow, he became the mask. He became the machine that did his duty for Konoha. He wasn't Kakashi the failure. He wasn't Kakashi the weakling. He wasn't Kakashi who let his best friend die and then killed the woman he loved just a few short years later. He wasn't Kakashi who promised to watch his sensei's son and then fled because he couldn't stand to look in those two blue eyes that looked far, far, far too much like his father's. During those times he was just Scarecrow. Just Scarecrow. He stepped out the shower with a bored look on his face, walked to his locker and put on his clothes. He sighed and started his slow walk towards the Anbu barracks. His room was a Spartan thing, a concrete cell more than anything else tucked into the furthest back of the barracks. He lay on his thin futon and placed his blade in its holder on the far wall. His eyes gazed up at the bare concrete for an eternity before he fell asleep. The loud knock on his room door woke him up some time later. His eyes scanned the room once more, he grabbed his white porcelain mask and slipped it on. His blade was on his back in a few moments, and he answered the door with the lackluster care he had become famous for. Scarecrow High. Anbu number 04025 Alpha High. The tall gray masked Anbu dropped the red scroll in his hand. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. A summons from the Sandame. When he looked back up, the gray masked Anbu was gone. He looked back at his bare cell, looked down once more at the red scroll in his hand, and felt a wave of nausea rush over him too soon. It was too damn soon. Fuck. The Sandame sat behind his desk when he appeared in his office in a cloudless shunshin. The old man, the monster on the battlefield in the guise of a grandfather, looked up from his task to look at him. His eyes were kind and soft, but his face was stern, and Kakashi felt his heart drop even more. Scarecrow, remove your mask. His breath hitched in his throat. An Anbu was never to remove his mask on duty. The Hokage was never to ask an Anbu to remove his mask unless they were in war or the Anbu in question was being dismissed. His time in Anbu was over with those 4 words. His time as Scarecrow was over. His heartbeat raced, his chest ached and he wanted to scream, to plead and shout at the elderly cage before him. But he couldn't. His pride stopped him, his will stopped him, and the stern hard look softened by those caring deep brown eyes stopped him. He removed his mask, and the Sandaime took a long deep drag of his pipe. Kakashi. That was it then. He was dismissed from Anbu. He's graduated. Kakashi, Minato's child, takes after his parents far too much. Sensei's child. Naruto, I'm not dismissing you from Anbu, Kakashi. I'm giving you a choice and asking of you a favor. The Sandaime stood up. He walked around his dark mahogany desk and stood in front of his windows. Naruto-kun has graduated, and with him 2 other youths that show quite the amount of potential and genius, though not quite up to him. I can't, Hokage-sama, I'm sorry. Killing intense silenced him. The old cage took another deep drag. Then there's Naruto-kun. He's brilliant, Kakashi. Smart, hardworking, driven, attentive. Really attentive. He notices the looks people give him, yet he ponders it. I wouldn't doubt if he has some clue as to the true nature of who and what he is. That worries me, Kakashi. Can you imagine Minato's son, a prodigy, going against a village because of their fear and anger? Can you imagine him doing so, except now with the might of the Kyuubi no Yoko at his control? And then there's the fact that it's now obvious to those looking that he is Minato's son. The similarities are too obvious. The other nations will take notice and they'll move to remove him before he becomes a danger. The longer they wait, the more dangerous he becomes. Sensei's son. I need someone I can trust not to take advantage of him. I need someone I can trust not to hurt him and to steer him and his entire team of little geniuses in the right directions. Down the path of the will of fire. I need someone I can trust to protect them, with their lives. I need you, Kakashi, I do. But it's up to you to make that choice. I can't make it for you. He stepped back from the window and sat in his seat. His eyes looked at Kakashi, deep, dark, gray pools that stared at him with anticipation. Team assignments is in 2 days, you have 24 hours to decide. If you decide to turn down my offer, I'll return you to Anbu, and you can continue your career unmolested by me. Dismissed. Naruto team assignments had never had him more nervous. He was sure they wouldn't split them up, but then again, he was going in blind now. He'd changed the timeline drastically, graduated as early as possible, and dragged Sakura and Sasuke with him. He was sure they would get political pressure from the Uchiha, the Hokage, and Sakura's mother to push them together, he hoped. So, at 8 in the morning with the dew still on the grass, he sat in an oversized desk watching the nameless Chunin in the front of the class call out names with his breath held in his stomach in a vice. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto, he breathed, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura, Team Sensei Kakashi Haddock. He seemed confused at the last part. Looked up at the 3 small children in seats meant for pre-teens and clicked his tongue. Naruto smirked and leant back into his seat. You were right. Sasuke seemed impressed. I was. So, Sasuke dragged the sound on. So what's our sensei like? He seemed annoyed, and Naruto couldn't help but to laugh. What makes you think I know? You always know. Now stop being a jerk and just tell us, Naruto. Sakura whispered in his ear. She seemed as annoyed as Sasuke was, and that caused him to sigh. He'll be a little late. Once everybody leaves, the best thing we can do is go get lunch and come back, maybe take a little nap too. Lunch and a nap? That sounds like more than a little late. It won't be too late in comparison to how he usually is. He looked up, senseis were already arriving and leaving with their students. Let's go get lunch, and then we'll head back. Lunch was decent enough, though the conversation kept coming back to their soon-to-be sensei. Sasuke and Sakura were reasonably worried, and in truth so was he. They re-entered the classroom, and only one more team was left. They cast a look at the team and sat down themselves. A few minutes later, a dark-haired Jounin arrived and took them away, his face flushing and looking slightly embarrassed. An hour later, Kakashi arrived. Naruto sensed him just as he entered the academy building. His chakra was a familiar presence he'd never be able to forget. He's here. Sakura seemed pissed off. He's also more than 2 hours late. Ma, sorry about that. I got a little lost on the way. She shrieked, and they turned to the source of the voice. I'm Kakashi, your Jounin sensei.